The cobblestone streets of Boston remained calm, the sound of church bells echoing through the ancient alleys. But in a luxurious room at the Rosewood Hotel, Emily Parker was facing the greatest nightmare of her life, not a betrayal by a stranger, but by those who shared her blood. It wasn't a knife in the back, not an obvious enemy. It was a silent, calculated, and cold-blooded betrayal that turned every dollar she had painstakingly saved into an unasked-for wedding gift. In that moment, Emily realized that the story she was about to tell was not just about a broken family, but about the journey of finding herself again amidst the honeyed words, the emotional debts, and the cruelest of deceptions. Let me take you into Emily's world, a world where the truth once exposed didn't just break hearts, but ignited a fire no one could ever extinguish. On that quiet morning within the luxurious confines of the Rosewood Hotel in Boston, where gentle sunlight filtered through thick curtains and traced thin golden lines on the floor, Emily Parker was packing up her things, getting ready to check out after her brother Sean's wedding, her heart still touched by the previous night's festivities. Next to her, Andrew, her boyfriend, a calm and intelligent lawyer, had his bags ready, waiting for Emily to finish the last steps. The soft strains of piano music drifted from the hotel's lobby, mingling with the low hum of tourists' chatter outside the window. Everything seemed perfect until Emily opened the banking app on her phone. In that instant, the world around her seemed to freeze. The numbers on the screen left her stunned, $8,400 gone, leaving only $1,600. Her finger trembled as she swiped again and again, hoping her eyes had deceived her. But no. Everything was still there, cold and stark, like a blade cutting through the calm she thought she had. Andrew? Emily's voice cracked hoarse as if something was caught in her throat. Andrew turned concern instantly washing over his handsome face. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice steady, but his brows drawing together. Emily handed him the phone, her hands shaking visibly. Andrew looked at the screen, his eyes narrowing, and in a heartbeat his usual gentle expression vanished, replaced by the focused coldness of a seasoned lawyer. He swiped through the transaction history quickly. $2,000 transferred to a credit card account in Olivia's name, Emily's sister. $4,000 sent to the account of Ethan, Olivia's husband. And $2,400 transferred to her mother, Mary Parker. All of it had happened the previous night while Emily was in the shower after the wedding party. A cold shiver ran down Emily's spine, her hand tightening, but her lips wouldn't stop trembling. "I don't understand. I didn't make those transactions. All that money." Her voice was breaking, but Andrew remained steady, his calm demeanor unwavering. "I know," he said slowly, his eyes narrowing with the resolve of someone well-versed in law and justice. "We need to call the bank immediately. This isn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This is unauthorized access. This is theft." Emily nodded, but inside her a storm was raging. She remembered every congratulatory word from the wedding night, the laughter, the warm golden light. All of it suddenly felt foreign, like a dream that had vanished in the harsh light of a new painful reality. She looked at Andrew, realizing that in his eyes was not just concern for a girlfriend. There was the unwavering gaze of a man ready to protect her at any cost. And in that moment, Emily knew she could no longer deny the truth. The money she had worked so hard to save, the effort she had put into standing on her own and building her life, it had all been stolen by the very people she had always called family. Her breath came quick and shallow, but she found strength in Andrew's warm, steady grasp. As they stepped out of the hotel room, the Boston spring breeze swept through the long hallway, carrying with it the scent of cherry blossoms. But in Emily's heart, those blossoms couldn't chase away the bitter taste rising inside her. This wasn't just a financial loss. This was the deepest kind of betrayal, a wound in her trust, a warning bell of a battle she knew she couldn't turn away from. And so, in the grand lobby of the Rosewood, Emily Parker stepped into the darkest chapter of her life, where the vanished dollars had taken not just her savings, but the image of a family she had once believed in without question. They stepped into the lobby of the Rosewood Hotel, the sound of Emily's high heels echoing off the gleaming marble floor. The crystal chandeliers above sparkled, but inside her there was only a hollow chill. As they paused at the reception desk to finalize the checkout, Emily's phone buzzed and the name she least wanted to see lit up the screen: her mother, Mary Parker. Her mother's voice came through the phone, warm and familiar. "As always, Emily, I just wanted to thank you for yesterday. Sean's wedding was wonderful. You did such a good job." For a moment, Emily wanted to believe in that warmth, as if those vanished numbers were just a trick of the light. But she took a deep breath, telling herself not to be weak. "Mom," she said, her voice calm but trembling, "last night a large amount of money was transferred from my account. Do you know anything about it?" There was a brief pause on the other end, only the faint music of the lobby filling the silence. Then Mary's voice returned, but the affection was gone, replaced by a soft, airy laugh. "Oh, is that so? I thought it was less than that." Emily froze. She glanced quickly at Andrew, his expression turning steely. "Mom, what are you saying?" Emily asked, her voice nearly breaking. "Olivia said you had more money than you needed. We just took a small part, considered it a wedding gift for Sean. We're family. You understand, right?" The words were light, casual, as if her mother were talking about buying a silk scarf, not admitting to stealing from her own daughter. A wave of dizziness swept over her, as if the air around her had thickened. Emily switched the phone to speaker so Andrew could hear every word. "Mom, that's not a wedding gift. That's theft," she said, her voice shaking but her eyes blazing with determination. Mary laughed, a soft, chilling laugh. "Oh, Emily, don't make such a big deal out of this. We're family, not strangers. You've always only thought of yourself, while Olivia and Ethan have a whole family to care for. You should learn to share. You have so much more than them." Andrew took the phone from Emily's hand, his voice calm but cold as steel. "This is Andrew, Emily's boyfriend. Do you understand that taking money from someone else's account without permission is a criminal offense?" The line fell quiet, Mary's voice dropping to a cold tone. "Oh, a lawyer. This is a family matter, not your concern." Emily clenched her fist, her nails digging into her palm. "Mom, how did you even access my account?" Silence for a moment, then Olivia's voice chimed in, clear and indifferent. "You always use the same password for everything. Did you know that? In the hotel room when you were in the shower, I saw my chance." Everything felt like it was shattering. Emily felt small and exposed, standing in this grand hotel lobby as if stripped bare. But in Andrew's eyes she found strength. He squeezed her hand and whispered, "We're not going to let this go." Emily looked out through the glass doors where taxis were lining up in the busy Boston street. The cold air seeped through the cracks of the door, but in her heart, she no longer felt the chill. She knew a battle had begun, not just to reclaim her stolen money, but to reclaim justice for herself. And in that moment, Emily understood sometimes betrayal doesn't come from an enemy, but from the very people you love the most. Here's the English translation in one continuous paragraph, as you requested. Emily stood at the door of her parents' house in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, her hands trembling slightly inside thin gloves. The red brick house with its pristine white windows still held the peaceful air of her childhood, but today, it felt like a cold fortress. Andrew placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his dark eyes calm and resolute. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm here." Emily took a deep breath and knocked lightly on the weathered wooden door. Slow footsteps echoed from within before her father, George Parker, opened the door, his face lighting up with a fake smile. "Oh, Emily, I thought you and Andrew had already gone back to Seattle." Without waiting for him to invite them in, Emily walked straight into the house, her eyes sweeping over the familiar objects that now felt so foreign. In the living room, Her mother Mary sat on an armchair, Olivia and Ethan on either side of her, like a council ready for negotiation. Nicholas lounged calmly on the sofa with a thin smile while Olivia shot her a triumphant glance. Emily stood tall, her voice calm but icy in a way they had never seen. "Who among you took my money and why?" Olivia shrugged as if it were nothing to be concerned about. "You always use the same password, Emily. While you were in the shower, I only needed a few minutes to log in. It was nothing." Her tone was so casual, as if recounting some minor errand. Emily swallowed her anger, her gaze fixed on Olivia. "Nothing, that was money I saved with my own sweat and tears. What gives you the right to touch it?" Nicholas, still lounging comfortably, let out a dry smile. "Because we needed it. You live alone with a high-paying job. We have kids' debts. Think about it. Olivia has 2 children to support, and what do you have? An apartment and a bunch of money you don't even use." His words stung like a bitter accusation. In that moment, Emily saw herself again at the children's birthday parties, Olivia sending her endless lists of expensive gifts, and her mother always pushing Emily into the role of provider. She took a deep breath, her voice low but steady. "Don't paint me as the villain in the story you've invented. I've helped. More than I should have. But this isn't help. This is theft." Mary sat there, her face eerily calm. "Emily, don't blow this out of proportion. We're family. You always only think of yourself while Olivia and Ethan have the burden of a family. Sharing is normal." Andrew stepped forward now, his voice steady and firm. "This isn't sharing. This is a crime. Unauthorized access and theft." Emily's father, George, finally lowered his newspaper, his voice deep and irritated. "Don't bring the law into family matters. Don't make this worse." Emily looked at her father, feeling as though every last bit of warmth in this home had disappeared. "I don't want to bring the law into this," she said softly but firmly, "but I will not let anyone treat me like this family's ATM anymore." Olivia's eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly replaced it with a mocking smile. "I told you you'll earn that money back soon enough. Don't act like you're dying over a few thousand." Emily stood still, her heart breaking. This house, once filled with the laughter of childhood, was now a place of cold, cutting words, harsher than any wind outside. In Andrew's eyes, she saw a determined reflection. This was the moment to stand up. For justice, and for herself. Emily stood silently in the warm yet unfamiliar living room, a place where laughter and family stories had once been sweet memories, but now echoed only as a broken melody. Olivia lounged in her chair, her gaze indifferent, certain she'd done nothing wrong, while Nicholas reclined like a man who had already won. "You can ask for it back, but the money's already gone," he said, lips curled into a half-smile. "Wedding gifts for Sean, paying off credit cards, a bit of new clothes. Olivia even bought me a smartwatch just like the one you wore the other day." "Nice, isn't it?" Emily felt her heart tighten. That watch Andrew had given it to her to celebrate her promotion, now flaunted by Nicholas, a blatant symbol of betrayal. "You spent that money as if it meant nothing to me," she whispered, her voice cracking. Nicholas sneered. "It was a gift from the family. And family has rights." Emily remembered the times Olivia had sent her birthday wish lists for her son Harry, filled with outrageously expensive items as if she was an endless wallet. She had always closed her eyes to it, believing that was how to preserve the fragile thread of love. But now she saw it clearly. It was only a chain they had chosen to wrap around her neck. "Mary," her mother shifted slightly, her voice gentle yet firm. "Emily, don't make this complicated. You've been helping this family for years. This is just a little more. It's nothing serious." Emily looked into her mother's eyes and saw not even a flicker of remorse or doubt, only the indifferent calm of someone who had grown used to seeing her daughter as a wealthy outsider. Andrew placed a hand on her shoulder, then squeezing lightly in a silent reminder, You're not the one in the wrong here. Emily took a deep breath, forcing down the surge of anger inside her, but her voice still shook with rage. Don't tell me this is just a little more. I paid for Harry's expensive birthday tablet. I bought Margaret the game console you demanded. All of it was my money, my hard work. And now you dare say it's just a few thousand that doesn't matter. Olivia raised an eyebrow, still wearing her mocking smile. You still don't get it, do you, Emily? This is your duty. Ethan and I have kids. We have responsibilities. What do you have besides that pile of money in the bank? Emily clenched her fists so hard her nails dug into her palms. In her mind, old memories resurfaced times her parents had missed her important days because they were busy with Olivia's things' birthdays, overshadowed by gifts they gave to others, not to her. At last, Emily rose, her voice low and steady as stone. No, that is not my duty. That is my privacy, my security. And you have trampled on it without a second thought. She turned her back, each step shedding the icy bonds that had kept her tied. The door to the living room closed behind her with a dull final click, like a bell tolling the end. In that moment, Emily knew she had lost a family she had once hoped would be her refuge. But at the same time, she had reclaimed a part of herself, a part that refused to let others decide her worth. As she stepped out of that grim house, Emily walked straight ahead, taking a deep breath to dispel the oppressive feeling that still clung to her. Boston that day was still wrapped in the cold of late spring, but every gust of wind seemed to sweep away the suffocating air she had just escaped. Andrew walked beside her, his eyes following every step she took like an invisible shoulder, letting her know she wasn't alone. I need to see Sean, she whispered, and Andrew nodded without hesitation. They drove through the cobblestone streets, arriving at an old apartment building where Sean lived with his new wife. He opened the door with dark circles under his eyes and a weary demeanor, as if the laughter and blessings of the previous night had all vanished, leaving behind only the remnants of a fleeting day of joy. Emily, what happened? Sean asked, his voice filled with concern when he saw the redness in his sister's eyes. Emily told him no beating around the bush, no hiding. She told him about the vanished money, about the terrifying indifference in Olivia and Nicholas's voices, about the cold stare of their mother. Sean's face paled as he listened, his hand trembling as he reached for the cold coffee cup on the table. I didn't know. I knew they always complained about money, but I never thought they'd do this to you, he said, his voice cracking. Emily looked into her brother's eyes and saw the terror and helplessness tearing at him. Sean, you're not the only one at fault here, she said softly, her voice gentle. You've been pushed into the middle of this, but you're not a thief. You just need to understand this isn't your fault. Sean lowered his head, his dark hair falling over eyes that brimmed with sadness. They said it was my wedding gift. They told me not to worry, not to pay attention, but I didn't know. I never asked. His voice trailed off. Emily placed her hand on his shoulder, a gentle gesture yet filled with strength. I believe you. I don't blame you, she said quietly. So, what are you going to do? Sean asked, his voice trembling like a child afraid of the coming storm. Emily lifted her head, her blue eyes glinting with a resolve she had never known before. I can't let them treat this like it's nothing. I'm going to seek justice not just for me, but for my own dignity. Sean nodded, his eyes glistening with a mix of emotion and shame. You won't do anything to tear the family apart, will you? He asked, his voice a fearful whisper. Emily shook her head, her voice suddenly cold but calm. The family was torn apart the moment they chose to betray me, Sean. It wasn't me. She stood up, squeezing her brother's hand to pass him her strength, then turned away. Andrew took her hand, and as they stepped outside, Emily felt a clear, bright idea ignite in her heart. The truth was sometimes a sharp blade, but it was better to hold it in your hand than to let it pierce your back when you turned away. Now she was ready for the next battle, a battle not just to reclaim the money lost, but to reclaim her own voice and worth things her family had long devalued and suffocated. Returning to her apartment in Seattle, Emily closed the door behind her, letting the darkness of the late spring night drape over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The small, tidy apartment, once a haven of peace, now felt like a cold fortress, but at least it was hers, a place no one had the right to invade. Andrew placed the thick file of documents on the table, the desk lamp casting a decisive glow across his face. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked, his voice deep and steady, like an anchor in the storm. Emily didn't answer immediately. She walked over to the window, looking down at the stretch of warm yellow streetlights, the city breathing slowly beneath the night sky. "I don't have any other choice," she said softly but firmly. "If I don't speak up now, they'll always think I'm just an endless wallet." Andrew nodded, opening the file that had been meticulously prepared. Bank statements, unreasonable demands in messages, even receipts from the expensive gifts Emily had been forced to buy for Harry and Margaret, all stacked together, each page like a cold cut into her heart. "You've helped them too many times already," Emily Andrew said, his voice calm, yet full of quiet pain. "Every time you stayed silent was another step they took into your life, like predators." Emily flipped through a bank statement, the figure $15,000 glaring back at her, like a dark ink stain. 3 years of unreciprocated sacrifice. "They never saw it as kindness," she murmured, "they saw it as obligation. Like I owed them before I even knew I could say no." Andrew was silent, his eyes deep and unwavering on her. Then he handed her a new folder, its deep blue cover marked with the words of a financial law firm. "This is Sonia," he said. "She's an old colleague of mine, specializes in financial crimes. She'll help you if you decide to go all the way." Emily took the file, her fingertips trembling slightly but her gaze steady. "I will," she said without a hint of doubt. "I'm going to report it all." Inside her, the rage and hurt had become a quiet strength, not just fear of being used anymore, but the courage to shatter the silence to protect herself. That night, they sat together at the small kitchen table, a space that had once been warm with laughter and late-night dinners. Emily laid out each document, memories of coercion and endless blame flowing through her mind like a murky river. "This won't be easy," Andrew said, his voice low but resolute. "But you won't be alone." Emily smiled, a thin smile, but one filled with an unbreakable will. She knew the road ahead was long. There would be sleepless nights, conversations filled with threats and tears. But for the first time, she felt a true calm in her heart because she had chosen to stand with the truth. No more apologizing for her kindness, no more silent sacrifices. From that moment on, Emily knew she was no longer the easy mark they thought she was. She had become the guardian of justice in her own life. As the neatly stacked documents lay on the table, Emily knew that the real storm was only just beginning. She had filed an official report with the Financial Crimes Division. Evidence painstakingly gathered by her and Andrew now lay in the hands of an officer named Taylor, who would speak the truth before the law on her behalf. That morning, as the early summer sunlight streamed through the small window of her apartment, her phone rang with a cold, persistent tone, not from friends or work, but from Olivia herself. "Emily, have you lost your mind?" Olivia's voice crackled sharp and tinged with panic. "Don't you realize if the police get involved, we'll lose everything? Harry, Margaret, what will happen to the kids?" Emily stayed silent, her fingers gripping the phone tightly. Every plea from her sister felt like an old blade once sweetened with the word family, now stripped bare and cruel. "This isn't my fault," she said, her voice calm like a dawnlit lake. "The blame lies with you and Nicholas, who chose to betray me." Nicholas called too. His voicemails flooded her inbox, his tone shifting from pleading to threatening like a spinning weather vane. "You'll regret this," he growled. "You think your lawyer will save you? You'll only bring this family down." Emily heard every word, but her heart no longer faltered. She knew that if she stayed silent now, she would be buried under the dust of false promises and polite deceit. And then, on a drizzly afternoon, Mary appeared at the door of her small apartment, her face no longer that of the gentle mother from days past, but a stranger, her eyes brimming with accusation. "You're killing this family, Emily Mary," said her voice cold and rasping as if every word of blame was a stone hurled at her chest. Emily stood tall, her gaze steady and unwavering. "No, mother," she replied, her voice no longer an excuse, but a declaration. "This family died the moment you all chose to lie to me, the moment you decided I would always stay silent, never daring to say no." Inside Emily, fear and love swirled together like a howling storm, but above it all she felt an unfamiliar peace. She knew that every time Olivia screamed that she was destroying the family, it was another confession of their own guilt. Every threat from Nicholas, every look of reproach from her mother, each one only proved that Emily had been right to step out of that circle of silence. And in Andrew's eyes, in the way he gripped her hand, Emily found an absolute faith that she no longer had to beg for permission to exist in someone else's story. They no longer had the right to demand her loyalty because they had been the ones to destroy it. Now she had chosen a path she would never turn back from, her own path, whether it led to storms or to light. One early morning, when the mist had yet to dissipate completely, Emily received the call she knew would change everything. Sean's voice came through the phone, low and faltering, as if he was battling the greatest fear of his life. "Emily, I can't keep pretending I don't know." Sean sighed, each word like a blade cutting into his own heart. "I know Olivia and Nicholas planned it all along. I know they used my wedding as a cover for everything." Emily fell silent, a flicker of both compassion and pain in her eyes. "Sean, this isn't your fault. But if you know, you need to speak up. You have to choose: either stay silent and let them keep treating me like I don't matter, or stand up, the way I have stood up." A heavy silence followed. Then Sean took a deep breath, his voice breaking but resolute. "You're right. I will stand on the side of the truth." When the day of the preliminary hearing came, Emily stepped into the courthouse with her heart pounding in her chest, but her eyes no longer held fear. In a crisp white blouse, her shoulders squared and her gaze calm, she was no longer the girl always told to stay quiet, but a woman determined to claim justice for herself. Sean sat across from her, his face pale, but when their eyes met, Emily saw not only shame, but also a glimmer of hope. When called to testify, his voice trembled at first, but then he stood tall, his hands clenched, his eyes fixed on Olivia and Nicholas, the very people he had once looked to for support. "I know they plotted together. They always said Emily would never dare to sue. They thought she would always be the one to endure." Each of Sean's words struck like a hammer against the wall of silence Olivia and Nicholas had built. Emily sat quietly in the back row, her hands clasped tightly, her heart leaping with every word of Sean's testimony. Beside her, Andrew held her hand firmly, his strength and faith in her, like a steady stream feeding her thirst for justice. When the judge declared Olivia and Nicholas guilty of unauthorized access and theft, Emily didn't cry. Not because she wasn't moved, but because she had already shed enough tears in the years she had been treated as a walking wallet. Now she simply closed her eyes for a moment, as if in that instant she had finally laid down the heavy burden on her back. The final judgment was delivered. Olivia and Nicholas were sentenced to 3 years of probation and ordered to repay all the stolen money, along with compensation for emotional distress. Her parents, Mary and George, didn't face criminal charges due to lack of evidence, but were held civilly liable. A 5-year no-contact order was issued like a legal wall protecting Emily from those who had once abandoned her in the name of family. As she left the courtroom, Emily looked up at the gray Boston sky and took a deep breath. In her heart there was no more bitterness, only a lightness, as if a door had closed to open a new path. A path of freedom. A path that belonged solely to her. A few weeks later, when the news about the lawsuit began to fade, Emily realized that the world kept turning and she was no longer trapped in the endless cycle of debt and twisted gratitude. One sunny afternoon, a small envelope appeared on her work desk. A letter from Marty Davis, a distant cousin she had only met a few times at family gatherings. Inside was a handwritten note, the script slanted yet decisive. Emily, you have no idea how much you've inspired me. Seeing you stand up for yourself made me realize I can do the same. I didn't sue them, but for the first time in my life, I dared to say no. After reading it, Emily leaned back in her chair, pressing the letter to her chest. Amidst all the loss, she had found something even more important. She had become a small beacon of light, helping someone else see they didn't have to bow to abuse, even if it came from those who claimed to be family. That weekend, Andrew took her out of the city to a quiet lakeside retreat outside Seattle, where the still water reflected the golden glow of the setting sun. They sat on the wooden dock, feet dangling above the cold water, hands intertwined, eyes locked on each other. "You've survived a huge battle," Andrew murmured, his voice a gentle whisper laden with weight. Emily nodded, smiling. No longer a forced smile, but a new beginning. "I've lost my old family," she admitted. "But now I know I can build a real one, with people who respect and love me." Andrew said nothing, simply pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple shimmering ring. He didn't need a fancy proposal, just one look and a warm smile, and Emily understood family wasn't about blood, but about those willing to hold your hand through the storm. When the official trial concluded, with Olivia and Nicholas bowing their heads to accept 3 years of probation, repaying every stolen dollar, along with compensation for emotional damages, Emily didn't find joy in that restitution. But she felt more at peace than ever before. Nicholas lost his job, his bank accounts frozen, their house on the brink of foreclosure. But none of that was her burden to bear anymore. Andrew had said it best. "They're reaping what they've sown, and it's no longer your responsibility." Emily no longer needed to wait for apologies from them or to hear their pleas or accusations. Her silence now was the loudest voice of all. And as she looked back, she saw her own footsteps, shaky, scarred, that had led her out of the darkness into a new chapter where she was no longer a sacrificial lamb, but the narrator of her own story. That night, under the warm yellow light of her small apartment, she opened her laptop, reading messages of support from strangers across the globe, each line a testament to the power of saying no. Emily knew this battle might be over, but the journey to build a life no longer bound by anyone else had truly just begun. And this time, she wasn't afraid, only filled with a steady heart and the belief that sometimes the most ruthless betrayal can open the door to a freedom no one can take away. Finally, as the door closed and the noise of the legal battle faded, Emily Parker stood in the glow of the late afternoon sun, her eyes turned to the sky, no longer weighed down by her family's judgment. She had dared to say no, dared to face the bitter truth, to reclaim what was rightfully hers. And more than that, to reclaim the right to define her own worth. This wasn't just a story of defiance, but an anthem of self-respect, determination, and the belief that even when pushed into the darkness, we can still find the light within ourselves. If this story moved or stirred something in, you don't forget to hit follow to join me as we explore more journeys of resilience, because it's these journeys that truly deserve to be told.